Hello friends, today I take up a new topic and the name of the topic is Was Samrat Ashok like Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb? This is the topic and I will cover both Samrat Ashok and Aurangzeb. Friends, you can ask me why I have taken this topic. I have taken this topic because one of the retired IAS officer equated Samrat Ashok with Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb. And so he was accused by so many politicians from ruling party of Bihar and accused him that he is denigrating the position of Samrat Ashok in Indian history. An FIR was lodged against ex-retired IAS officer. So friends, now I will discuss this topic and will arrive at decision or conclusion as to whether Samrat Ashok was like Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb or not. So now my lesson plan includes why is it in the news. Number 2, Samrat Ashok and his accession to the throne of Patliputra, accession of Aurangzeb on the throne and reign before Buddhist influence, the reign of Ashoka before the Buddhist influence, then cunning war and conversion to Buddhism, reign after Buddhist influence, violence after conversion, propagation of Dhamma, religious policy of Aurangzeb, and finally conclusion. So I will narrate one by one these points. I hope friends you will cherish this topic. If you like my channel, please share and subscribe AJIAS Academy on YouTube and get numerous videos relating to Indian history, Constitution of India, Indian geography, Indian economy, general science, general mathematics and reasoning. So you need not go anywhere. Why you should read with me? Friends, as you know that whenever I cover a topic, it is multidimensional. It is not unidimensional that you find in newspapers or television. So whenever I cover a topic, I take up and discuss all the facets of particular topic. And so whenever you listen to my video or lecture, there is no need to go anywhere. So please share and subscribe my channel AJIAS Academy on YouTube. Now let us start the proceedings. Friends, number 1, why is it in the news? And I have already told you that DP Sinha, Daya Prakash Sinha, an ex-IAS officer, and he is a prolific writer also. So he claimed that Samrat Ashok was like Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb in his drama Samrat Ashok. Mr. Sinha is Padma Shri awardee and a prolific writer, and now because of his equation of Samrat Ashok with Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb, he was very much accused by the politician of Bihar who trace their descent from the Maurjans, particularly the caste Kurmis. So, according to Buddhist sources, Samrat Ashok was called Kama Ashok and Chanda Ashok. Why? Because in the initial phase of his career or in his childhood, Samrat Ashok was very much cruel, and that's why he was called Chanda Ashok in the Buddhist texts. He was called also Kama Ashok because of his acute sexual cravings, and that's why he was called Kama Ashok in different Buddhist texts. Friends, as you know that I will discuss it later on. According to Sinha, like Aurangzeb, Samrat Ashok also killed his brother to get the Mauryan throne, particularly the killing of his elder brother Susim, who was the crown prince of Mauryan dynasty. Like Aurangzeb, Samrat Ashok exhausted the resources for the propagation of Buddhism. And again, the Samrat Ashok was suffering from skin disease, and so whenever women ignored him, he got them burned to death. So many stories are written about the cruelty of Samrat Ashok in the Buddhist texts of Ashok Vadan, Divya Vadan, Mahavans, Divyavans. Now, he got his wife burnt on account of her humiliation to a Buddhist monk. All these accusations against Samrat Ashok were adduced from Buddhist texts. Now, I have already told you that a case has been registered against D.P. Sinha because leveling the charge of denigration of Samrat Ashok. Now, friend, you see, this is the map of Mauryan India, and you will find that during the period of Samrat Ashok, the extent of Mauryan Empire reached at its zenith. Now, in the northern area, what you see, that up to the southern Afghanistan, including the area of Kandahar, Ghazni, Kapisha, all these areas were the part of Mauryan Empire. Similarly, you see again in the far south, except far south Kerala or Madurai areas, the entire south was under the Mauryan dynasty, and its capital was Suvarnagiri, somewhere in Karnataka. Ujjaini was the capital of Western province, and the eastern part had its capital at Tosali. This is the Tosali. You see, after the conquest of Kaling area, this white area denote the Kaling kingdom, and that was captured by Samrat Ashok in 261 BC. So you see that the Mauryan dynasty or the Mauryan empire reached at its zenith during the period of Samrat Ashok. Patliputra was its capital, and one of the provincial centers was also located at Patliputra. Now it is called Patna, the capital of Bihar. Now, this is the map of Mughal Empire during the period of 1707, when Aurangzeb died. During the period of Akbar, you see the yellow line. This yellow area was added by Akbar, and Akbar died in 1605. So these areas, all the yellow areas were captured during the period of Akbar, the Mughal Emperor Akbar. Now, during the period of Aurangzeb, we see that the entire southern areas like Bijapur, Golconda were captured by Aurangzeb in 1686 and 1687. And these areas earlier, during the period of early Mughals, you see this is the area because they had come from Central Asia. I mean Fargana, somewhere, this area. And now after crossing Hindu Kush, Babur controlled this area, Kabul and around Lahore, the entire Suba of Punjab. Later on, in the Battle of Panipat in 1526, by defeating Ibrahim Lodi, Babur became the emperor of northern India. But his empire was very much restricted. This Mughal empire was extended very much during the period of Akbar and later on during the period of Aurangzeb, when the Mughal empire reached at its zenith, even capturing the area of Assam or Brahmaputra Valley. So friends, I have shown you two kinds of map. Why? Because in both the regime, the Samrat Ashok and during the period of Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb, the geographical extent of India reached at the highest level, not to be seen in another period except during the period of British rule in India. So now let us start the discussion. Samrat Ashok and his accession to the throne of Patliputra. Friends, as you know that we have numerous rock-cut edicts, pillar edicts about the Dhamma policy of Samrat Ashok, his administrative policy. But as far as early years of Samrat Ashok is concerned, we have to depend upon Buddhist texts. These Buddhist texts like Ashok Vadan, Divya Vadan, Deepavans, Mahavans, all these texts were written 400 later. I mean around 200 AD. So these texts are not so much reliable. Number one. Number two, the information, again, according to Ashok Vadan, a Buddhist text, the Mauryan Emperor Bindusar disliked Ashoka because of his rough skin, but it is also true that Bindusar gave important responsibilities to Ashok for his capabilities, like the duty to quell violence or revolt in Taxila. Now, this is the area in Pakistan around Peshawar, and giving him the governorship of western province of Mauryan Empire, and its capital was Ujjaini. Now it is called Ujjain, which is situated in Madhya Pradesh. Legend suggests that Samrat Ashok was not the crown prince. Actually, his elder brother Susim was the crown prince. And when Bindusar fell ill and Susim was at Taxila to quell the second revolt, so Samrat Bindusar wanted to have Susim along his side. He wanted to anoint his crown prince but he called Ashok from Ujjain and ordered him to go to Taxila to quell the revolt and to bring back Susim along his side, but his minister did not acquiesce to his order. And so Ashok remained there. Ministers insisted upon Samrat Bindusar to anoint Ashok for time being, but Samrat Bindusar did not agree with this proposal, and so what Ashok did, he anointed himself as the king of Mauryan Empire, and in between Samrat Bindusar died. And so when Susim, his elder brother, came back from Taxila, he was treacherously killed by the Prime Minister Radhagupta. According to Mahavans, Susim was treacherously killed by the minister, Radhagupta. And so you see, friends, that according to the opinion of most of the historians, Samrat Bindusar died in 273 BC. But Samrat Ashoka became the king or the emperor of Mauryan Empire in 269 BC. These 4 years, the gap of 4 years, were used by Samrat Ashok for quelling, for suppressing the revolts in different parts of the empire, and finally he ascended the Mauryan throne in 269 BC. Now the text also states that Samrat Ashok, before his ascension to the throne, killed his 99 half brothers, except his own brother, uterine brother, that is called Tissa. Now what about the accession of Aurangzeb, the 6th Mughal emperor of Aurangzeb, on the throne? Friends, as you know, that Aurangzeb was also not the crown prince. The Mughal emperor Shah Jahan had already anointed Dara Shikoh, his elder brother, as the crown prince, and raised his mansabdari from 40,000 to 60,000. That was an unparalleled decision. So you see that by defeating Dara Shikoh in the battle at Dharmat, Aurangzeb came nearer to Agra, and then in the final battle of Samugarh, which is 6 to 10 kilometers away from Agra, finally Aurangzeb captured the Mughal throne. At one time, the forces of Dara Shikoh was on the verge of getting victorious, and they were outnumbering the forces led by Aurangzeb and Murad, because Aurangzeb had made treaty with his brother Murad, and the main point of the treaty was to snatch the Mughal empire from Dara Shikoh and then to partition the empire between two brothers. Now what you see, that when Aurangzeb saw the imminent defeat, he raised the slogan of religious slogan of jihad, and thereby consolidated all the orthodox Sunni Muslim by his side, and finally was able to give crushing defeat to his elder brother Dara Shikoh. And so one by one, Aurangzeb eliminated his three brothers, like Murad, who was put into jail and thereafter he was killed, against Shuja, who was defeated around Allahabad, and then he was hounded out, and Shuja fled away to Arakan Hills, and he was killed by the tribals of Arakans. And finally Dara Shikoh was captured from the border of Afghanistan, and then he was brought to Delhi, paraded publicly, and then was killed. His son Suleiman Shikoh was also killed. So one by one, he killed his brothers, nephews, and then finally ascended the Mughal throne. And he ruled for 50 years, more than any Mughal emperor in India. So he captured his father, imprisoned him in the Red Fort of Agra, where his father was a captive for next 7 years before he died in 1665. And so you see that how Aurangzeb invoked the orthodox Sunni Muslim sentiments during the battle, fought against his brothers. Now we switch over to another point, the reign before Buddhist influence. What was the position of Samrat Ashok before his conversion to Buddhism? Friends, as you know that in 261 BC, Kalinga, nowadays it is called Urisha, Kalinga was captured or conquered by Samrat Ashok in 261 BC. But according to Rock Edict 13, around 1 lakh people were killed. 1,50,000 people were made captives, and many more perished. This incident of war completely moved Samrat Ashok, and he became Buddhist. His personal religion was Buddhist as per the information given to us by Bhabru Edict. So we see that before the conversion of Samrat Ashok as Buddhist, he was cruel as per the Buddhist tradition. So what you find that he was a violent person. The 5th century Chinese traveler Faiyan stated that Ashoka personally visited the underworld to study the torture methods and then invented the method of torture, or perpetuating cruelty upon people. Similarly, the 7th century Chinese traveler Huansang claims to have seen a pillar marking the site of Ashoka's hell or jail. All these points of cruelty seems to be fabrication of the Buddhist authors. They just wanted to show the world the miracle, the power of miracle of Buddhism, and which changed Ashoka as a righteous person like Dhamma Ashoka. Now, Kalinga War and conversion to Buddhism, and I have already told you that how much Kalinga War fought in 261 BC impacted upon the nature of Samrat Ashoka. He relinquished war and adopted the policy of peace. Instead of Bheri Ghosh, he adopted the policy of Dhamma Ghosh. Now, according to Mahavans, Ashoka constructed 84,000 stupas in the memory of Lord Buddha. He made pilgrimage to Bodhi tree, started propagating Dhamma, and performed social activities, welfare activities like establishment of medical treatment for human and animals, and plantation of medicinal herbs, digging of wells, and plantation of trees around the road. These were the welfare activities conducted by Samrat Ashoka after his conversion to Buddhism. So, inscribed edicts to propagate Dhamma, appointed Rajukas and Dhammamatras, called Third Buddhist Council at Patliputra to settle the schism or differences between the different sects of Buddhism, like the tussle between Mahayana and Hinayan. So you see that the Third Buddhist Council was organized at Patliputra with the presidency of Moggaliputta Tissa, and who tried to patch up schism in Buddhism. Sent 9 Buddhist missions to spread Buddhism in different parts of the border areas like Sri Lanka. He sent his son Mahendra and daughter Sanghmitra to propagate Buddhism in Sri Lanka, and similarly he sent missions to Myanmar. Earlier it was called Suvarna Bhumi, and then other regions like in the northern parts of India, Gandhar areas, in the southern states. So you see that there were so many missions were dispatched by Samrat Ashoka for the propagation of Buddhism. Now, violence after conversion. Friends, as you know that Buddhist texts still insist that even after conversion to Buddhism, Samrat Ashoka ordered a massacre of 18,000 monks who belonged to Ajivka sect. According to Ashok Vadan, he similarly tortured Nirganthas. In those days, Jainas were called Nirganthas, and so, but a scholar do not agree with these writings because they think that all these stories of persecution by Ashok of rival sects are just a fabrication arising out of sectarian propaganda. Now I switch over to another point, propagation of Dhamma. Friends, as you know, that Dhamma is not Buddhism. Although personal religion of Samrat Ashoka was Buddhism. Nobody can deny this. But his Dhamma policy was a political policy. It was articulated for the stability of his vast empire. And so, first of all, we see what is Dhamma. Number one, in different rock edicts, Ashoka, Samrat Ashoka tells us that he cares for his people, for his subject, like his children. It means that he believed in paternal kingship. Secondly, appointment of Dham Mahamatras to regulate Dham in the vast or distant areas of empire. Disapproved rituals, forbidden killing of certain birds, animals, banned social functions where people enjoyed in revelry or gaiety, preached amity between different sects. To preserve social order, that people should always obey their parents, pay respect to Brahmanas and Sramanas, show mercy to slaves and servants, show loyalty to king, compassion towards animals, proper behavior towards relative, utmost importance to tolerance. Friends, as you know that during the period of Samrat Ashoka, the Mauryan Empire had become vast, and there were areas which were at different level of development. Large sections of tribals were living in his empire. There was always the imminent danger of revolt against the authority, and we have seen that how two revolts occurred at Taxila, which was the capital of the western part of the Mauryan Empire. So it was incumbent, it was necessary for Samrat Ashoka to propagate the policy of Dhamma and to give utmost importance to tolerance. And that's why he wanted to have a stability in family life. He wanted to have a stable government. And that's why Samrat Ashoka adopted tolerant religious policy. He did not foist, this is the remarkable thing, he did not foist his personal religion, I mean Buddhism, upon his subjects. He made gifts to non-Buddhist sects also, and those who were against Buddhism relied upon the policy of peace, non-aggression and cultural conquest. Similarly, stressed upon Vyavahar Samta and Dand Samta. It means that in matters relating to criminal law, that means Vyavahar Samta, everybody is equal, irrespective of the Varna or caste he belonged to. And in Dand Samta, it means civil matters. So in both civil and criminal matters, everybody is equal in the eyes of law, irrespective of the position he held, irrespective of the caste or varna he belonged to. This was a revolutionary step. When the dominance of Brahmanas has been very much in his empire. And friends, as you know that his grandfather Chandragupta Maurya established Mauryan empire and his prime minister was Kautilya or Chanakya or Vishnugupta. And he wrote Arthashastra, the famous Arthashastra book. So virtually Kautilya won the empire for Chandragupta Maurya, who had got enmity with the previous Nanda rulers. So you see that by stressing upon Vyavahar Samta and Dand Samta, Samrat Ashok established rule of law in those days, and that was a revolutionary step. Now, religious policy of Aurangzeb. I have already discussed about the religious policy of Samrat Ashok, and now I will discuss the religious policy of Aurangzeb and how the religious policy of Aurangzeb was diametrically opposite to that of Samrat Ashok. That I will discuss now. Now friends, you see that in 1658 AD, Aurangzeb ascended the throne of Mughal Empire by killing his relatives, his brothers, and now he started, or you can say reverse, some of the religious policies adopted by his predecessors. Like, he forbade inscriptions of Kalma on the coins, discontinued the festival of Nowruz, accusing it as a festival for Parsis, appointment of muhtasibs to see that people follow their life according to Sharia, like Samrat Ashok, who appointed Dhamm Mahamatras in order to regulate the life of people, in order to so that they can observe the rule of Dhamma. Now forbade the singing in the court, pensioned off musicians, although instrumental music continued in his court, discontinued the practice of Jharoka Darshan, I mean the showing of the body of the king or the emperor at the weekly interval, forbade weighing the emperor against gold and silver on his birthdays. Similarly, forbade astrologers to prepare almang, janpatri, kept half of the cess on goods to be exported or imported. Then Hindu traders kept half of the cess on goods of Muslims to be exported or imported. Then Hindu traders. And now Hindu traders were charged 5% of the cost, 5% cess of the cost of merchandise. Now, Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb reversed the policy of Emperor Akbar. He reimposed jizya on Hindu subject, although this jizya tax was not more than 2.5%, but it was discriminatory. It denoted the feeling of second-class citizen for Hindus. So now in the majority, in a country where the majority were Hindus, jizya tax was very much detested by Hindus. But he levied jizya by reversing the policy of Akbar. New temples were allowed to be built, but old places of worship could be repaired. No new temples. Another farman was no new temples could be built, but Old places of worship could be repaired. Again, destruction of temples at Banaras, Mathura, the temple of Kesarai, and Odisha. Hundreds of temples were destroyed in Odisha. Ban on Muslim students to read under the guidance of Brahman teachers at Thatta, the capital of Sindh, and Multan. Destruction of temples around Udaipur. Motive was to convert India from Darul Harb to Darul Islam. Annexation of Shia states like Bijapur and Golconda. Government became Islamic in character, and revolt by Jat, Satnamis, Sikhs, Marathas, Rajput, Afghans. Friends, while Samrat Ashok promulgated policy of Dhamma, he did not foist his personal religion Buddhism upon his subjects. He talked about respect for elders, for Brahmanas, for Sramanas, for Vyavhar Samta and Dand Samta, irrespective of the religious affiliation a person had. But during the period of Aurangzeb, what we find that Aurangzeb was bent upon converting India from Darul Harb to Darul Islam, an Islamic country. So Aurangzeb, whatever Aurangzeb did, it was only for Sunni Muslims. His sectarian views was very much detrimental for the consolidation of the Mughal Empire. He did not spare even the Shia states of Bijapur and Golconda. So friend, what you see, that although in his private life he was better than other Mughal emperors, he was called Jinda Peer, the living saint. But his religious policy, his political policies completely against his personal life. The political personal life was completely against the political and religious policy of Aurangzeb. By following the sectarian religious policy, Aurangzeb distanced majority of Hindus from the Mughal Empire. And that's why, what you see, that during his regime, Jats revolted against Mughal Empire, Satnamis revolted, then Maratha waged war, and which drained the resources of Mughal Empire. Sikhs became very much hostile to the Mughal, and ninth Guru, sixth Guru was hanged. That was not a prudent political policy. Sikhs forever became an enemy of the Mughal Empire. Similarly, Afghans and Marathas and other and the common people became disenchanted with the policy of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. And that's why, what you see, that in 1700 AD, when Aurangzeb was on the throne, India was the largest GDP. It was 24% of the GDP of the world. But within a span of 30 years. Aurangzeb died in 1707, and within a span of 30 years, in 1739, the Mughal Badshah Muhammad Shah Rangila was on the feet of invader Nadir Shah, who looted Takhte Taus and crores of properties, killed 1 lakh people in Delhi. So what you see, that the Mughal Empire was on the feet of invader Nadir Shah. So friend, what you see, that because of the sectarian policy adopted by Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb, the Mughal Empire declined abruptly. So my conclusion from this lecture is that number one, the Aurangzeb wanted an Islamic state by converting the majority Hindus into Islam, but he could not succeed because of the stiff opposition by Rajputs. He wanted to impose Islam upon Hindu population, but he could not succeed, although he converted at least 5 to 10% of the Hindu population in different parts of the country. On the other hand, Samrat Ashok did not impose or forced his personal religion, Buddhism, upon his subjects. He adopted the policy of Dhamma, which was based upon statecraft and tolerance. So, he did not try to convert majority of Hindus into Buddhism. So Samrat Ashok cannot be compared with Mughal Badshah Aurangzeb, and that's why I conclude that the contention of D.P. Sinha is wrong. Samrat Ashok was not like Aurangzeb. Samrat Ashok has got a special place in Indian history and also in world history. Friends, most of the story of cruelties or torture of other sects or other religious people by Samrat Ashok is based upon the narratives by Buddhist texts which were written after 400 years of the Samrat Ashok, after the accession of Samrat Ashok. And so these Buddhist texts are not too much reliable. They were just fabrication. They were meant only to glorify the miracle power of Buddhism and was meant to show as to how Buddhism can have a salutary effect upon a person. And that's why, according to Buddhist text, Samrat Ashok converted himself from Chanda Ashok to Dhamma Ashok, from a Ashok, a cruel person, to a righteous person. So friends, now I conclude my lecture. I hope that you might have relished this lecture. If you like, please share and subscribe my videos. This is free channel. Just type AJI IS Academy on YouTube and you'll find numerous videos. Stay fit. Thank you very much.